Hi guys, I'm Kasha. Welcome to the channel and welcome as always to our coffee times. Today I'm here to talk to you about all of the books that I read in the month of February. It was a really good month for me when it comes to reading, so we do have a lot to talk about.
It's coffee time.
Alright you guys, so in the month of February, I think I read between 15 or 16 things, which sounds like a lot, especially for me. I normally tend to read between 8 to 10 books, but there is a lot of novellas and short books, so that is kind of the reason why. And actually a lot of them I enjoyed, so it was a really good month for me in general, and I'm here to tell you all about the books. And in this channel we like to rate books with coffee mugs because we just think it's appropriate for our coffee times. And also I start with the lowest rating so that we end up always with a positive tone with our highest rating. If you're new here and you love books and horror, please consider subscribing to the channel before you leave, and also hit the notification bell so you're notified every time that we have another coffee time. You guys, this is everything plus ebooks. So we have a lot to talk about. I'm going to try to be quick and just get to the point with each book. So let's start. Let's start with the lowest rated books, and there are two in that category that actually are going to be automatic unhauls for me. The first one is Endlessly by Kirsten White. This book, I just wanted to finish it because I owned the complete physical trilogy of Paranormalcy and I just wanted to be done with them and just donate them, get them out of my house. And to be honest, I have not even written a review for this book on Goodreads. I always write something, even if it's just a couple of lines, but with this one I didn't even bother because I mean, I didn't really have many good things to say about it. It was nothing special, it was boring, it dragged. I felt like they were just stretching the story to impossible levels of stretching, and the main character kept getting more and more annoying as the trilogy went on. And still the cursing thing where she just says bleep, oh I bleeped, I just can't. I just can't. I couldn't deal with it, so I'm just glad that I have finished it and now I can get rid of it. Moving on with the next one that I'm going to automatically unhaul and get rid of it as soon as I finish this video, and that is Season of the Witch by Sarah Rees Brennan. Now with this book I had a couple of problems with it. There is nothing wrong with the writing style, with the editing, like all of these things were okay for me for a YA book. However, this was sold as a prequel. It even says so in the cover. It says a prequel novel. So it's supposed to be the story before the Netflix show. However, this just felt like the first couple of episodes of the Netflix show with some changes to the story. And I was a little bit disappointed by that. My biggest issue with this book was that the characters, the way that they are written, they had for me nothing to do with the characters that I know from the show. It's not that I don't like teenage angst. I understand that for certain stories, for certain books, especially YA books, we need those kind of elements to the story. But Sabrina has a really weird relationship with cousin Ambrose in this book. Kind of Ambrose hates her or something like that. And then we have Sabrina that is very insecure and she's jealous from page one. Page one, she's jealous because Harvey supposedly is looking at another woman when he's actually looking at a car. Page 20, she's jealous again. And then she even gets jealous of Harvey's brother, and I was like, I cannot take this anymore. I just can't take this anymore. I don't know, I just did not like the characters at all, and definitely a book that I'm going to get rid of, and I'm not gonna continue with the series. We are going up one coffee mug, and with 3 we have Thanks by Sarah Anderson. This is a very short book. It's just basically a compilation of some comic strips, and it is about the relationship between a vampire and a werewolf that are in a love relationship, and it does take all the tropes and stereotypes from vampires and werewolves to make jokes, and I kind of like this kind of silly humor. I really love to see how they struggle because obviously they're very different creatures, and you get to see how they struggle being a vampire, being a werewolf, and especially living together as a couple. So yeah, it was cute, it was fun, but it was also very short. The next one is the spooky middle grade that I had chosen for the month of February, and that is Dark Side by Tom Becker. This is the first book on a series, and we follow Jonathan. He's not your typical teenager. He basically lives by himself because his father is always in and out of the hospital because he's sick. And one day he realizes that some people seem to be following him, and those are bounty hunters coming for him. He doesn't know why, and he's on the run, and while he's running, he ends up crossing this door to another world that's called the Dark Side. The book is set in England, in London, and I really love to see that. I really loved when we went to the Dark Side and we were able to explore different characters, different type of creatures, and how that the world kind of works in contrast to the light world, which is, you know, our regular world. So I'm definitely gonna move on with the series. The only problem is I have tried to get the second book from this and I have not been able to find it anywhere. So as soon as I'm able to find a copy, I will continue with the series. The next one is Children of Chicago by Cynthia Pelayo. This is the new release that I vlogged and reviewed for you guys, so I'm gonna keep it short. If you want to see all my thoughts on the book, you can go to that video. And actually, I had originally given this book 3.5 and I have gotten it down to 3 because the more I think about it, the more I see issues with the book. So we follow a detective in Chicago, and her life is actually not being easy. She has a lot of baggage that comes with her, and she's in the middle now of an investigation. There seems to be a serial killer on the loose targeting teenagers, and this story is supposed to be a retelling of the Pied Piper, and we do get to see some references to that. However, my biggest issue with this book is that it was extremely info dumpy. At some point in the book, I just felt like all the research about Chicago, all the research about fairy tales was just being dumped in chunks in the book, instead of being integrated in the story. I hope this makes sense. Like, I just felt like she was doing research and she was loving what she was finding out about Chicago or about fairy tales, and she just dumped the information in the book. And it kept interrupting the investigation, it kept interrupting, you know, the mystery around the Pied Piper and the teenagers, and I just ended up not caring anymore about that mystery. And it was a pity because I did like that they took the Pied Piper and they did something similar to Candyman or Bloody Mary, but unfortunately it was just way too info dumpy. And honestly, the information about the fairy tales, it was really interesting to me, but this was not a non-fiction book. Like, if I want to get all of that history, then I will go to a non-fiction book that is telling me the story about fairy tales. The next book that I have for you, it is going to be perfect, if you have not read it, for the fall season, for Halloween, for October month, and that is The Last Harvest by Kim Liggett, and this is YA horror, and honestly, this is one of the best YA horrors that I have read, in the sense that it is not as extremely tropey as other ones that I have read. There is a little bit of a romance here that was a little bit cringy at times, but it was doable for me. So we follow the story of Clay, and he lives in this small town. His dad died in very weird circumstances, and he's now taking care of his mom, his 2 sisters, and the farm. So Clay starts having nightmares about really gruesome things, and apart from that, there is this society, kind of a secret society, where privileged people from the community in this small town belong, and they want to get Clay into this society because his father was also a member. So it's kind of also like a secret society slash cult story, which was for me the most interesting part of the book. But I really enjoyed it. The things that you get to see sometimes get really gory, they get really graphic, so I loved to see that on a YA book, because it really gets descriptive. So if you're looking for a good YA horror, especially for the fall season, this is the one. The next one is a novella that I read, and that is The House on Abigail Lane by Kaylin Patrick Burke. I really enjoyed this book. However, I felt like it was too short and I didn't get all the information that I wanted. So this book is inspired by stories like Winchester or Amityville, those haunted houses, those typical stories. So we have this house that for years people that have been living there and went to the upper floor have mysteriously disappeared, and at the beginning nobody really paid much attention until later on. And my only problem with this story is that it just went too fast and I didn't really have time to really get the full fleshed out story about this house and about the things that happened there and the whys and the hows, and it just felt like really skipping through really quickly. So I feel like for me I needed more of this story. The next book has a cover that I just love so much, and that is Save the Last Dance for Me by Judy Miller. This is an 80s horror thriller from 1981, and to be honest, this book was nothing extremely special. It didn't really have many twists and turns to the story, and you could easily tell what was gonna happen. However, it was in a way so interesting and so engaging that I loved all of the nearly 400 pages of it. So we are following a serial killer that focuses on killing ballet dancers, like these beautiful, perfect young women. And you know, you get to see him also talk about his childhood, so you get to really explore his psyche and where all of his troubles and problems come from. On the other side, you also get to follow the police department, the investigation. You also get to see how the victims feel, how the ballet dancers feel. And I don't know, I really just enjoyed the whole story. I thought it was a really well done 80s typical serial killer thriller. And if you love true crime, I think you're gonna enjoy this story as well. Moving on to Hidden Bodies by Caroline Kepnes. This one also deals with a killer. We have Joe. This is the second book on the Jew series. The third book is coming out already this month of March, but I'm waiting for the paperback that is coming out in April so that I can match my set, because I have them in paperback. And when I read You, I really enjoyed it, and one of my favorite things again was getting into the psyche, into the train thought of a killer and how they rationalize things and how they see things so different from everybody else. That's one of the things that always fascinates me also with true crime stories, is how these people think. And I think that's one of my favorite things about these books, because you really get to see the story told from his perspective, from his thoughts. And in this story we follow Joe after the events of the first book, and in this particular book he travels to LA. I'm not gonna tell you why, how, because I don't want to spoil everything, but basically he gets introduced to new characters and we get to see him react to these people and make decisions. There is not too much I can tell you, because obviously I would be spoiling a little bit of book one, but all you have to know is that Joe is kind of a sociopath, and he always gets really obsessed with women that he thinks are stupidly in love with him, and he's so sure that that is the one, until something happens and then he gets mad and he turns into a dangerous person. So the book was great. My only complaint was that the last 80 pages or 100 pages were really dragging, and I just wanted to finish it at some point. I was like, yeah, I get it, I get the point, you're stretching a little bit this ending. So I just hope that they would have edited that down a little bit. But I'm still intrigued, because especially after the ending of this book, I really need to know what's going to happen in book 3. So I'm glad that's coming out for me in paperback in April, so that I can jump to it. But yeah, I really enjoy it though. The next one is a novella that I read on my Kindle that I actually really enjoyed, and that is The Coffin Shadows by Glenn Kirsch and Mark Steensland. So we follow Janet. She is a pregnant teacher, and at some point she starts having these breakdowns. She starts having kind of hallucinations. She doesn't know what's happening to her, and her therapist tells her that maybe it would be a good idea to visit her parents that she has not seen in many years, and to try to figure out what happened to her when she was younger, because there is obviously some kind of trauma that she is not, you know, she's not over with. And so she decides to go back and confront her parents and confront what happened to her years ago. And as in many stories go, what she ends up discovering is way darker than she could have imagined. I really enjoyed this novella, because even though novellas are short, I felt like with this one I really got a nice full-on story with some twists. I really got fleshed out characters and I was really invested in the story. So if you're looking for a good horror novella, you might want to check this one out. Next we have I Am Not a Serial Killer by Dan Wells, and after being a huge fan of the film, I decided to finally pick up the book and I absolutely loved it. This book might not be for everyone because the humor that it has is very dark and not everybody's gonna be up for it, but that is exactly what I love. So we follow this 15-year-old that lives in a small town and he helps his family at the mortuary, so they prepare bodies of dead people. So he has always been confronted with death, and he's also obsessed with true crime stories and serial killers, and he believes that he might be a sociopath himself, and he gets really interested in a series of murders that start happening in the small town, and decides that because he's so smart and he knows so much about serial killers, he's going to be able to find this guy. And that's basically the premise of the story. And you get the story told from the perspective of the 15-year-old with all of his jokes and all of his macabre thoughts and all of his dark humor, and I absolutely loved it and definitely going to move on with this series. Moving on to the next novella, we have Starving Ghosts in Every Thread by Eric LaRocca. I also have a reading blog / review for you guys if you want to check it out. And basically this is a very poetically written, very beautifully written story about grief. We have Teddy. She is stuck in her hometown taking care of her ill mother, and you're going to go through such a roller coaster of emotions. And for me, one of the best things about this story is that it's so open to interpretation, and it is just so unique. The story was very emotional, it was creepy, it had really interesting writing style. It might not be for everybody because it is almost like poetry, and it is not one of those easy stories that you're going to get spoon-fed to you. Like, you really have to think about it and get into your feelings to understand all of the complexity of the story. And now we jump to something completely different because we have middle grade fantasy. I read Wondersmith by Jessica Townsend. This is the book 2 in the Nevermore series, and I loved it. I loved it as much as I loved the first one. I know a lot of people say the second book is better. I don't know, I really enjoyed the first one because it had trials, and I'm a sucker for trials in books. But this was a beautiful continuation. If you don't know about this series, we follow Morrigan. She has been told when she was young that she was cursed and she was gonna die, but then the night where she's supposed to die, somebody comes and rescues her and takes her to Nevermore. So that happens in the first chapters of the first book, and then she starts to get to know Nevermore and how that world works and all of that, and she's kind of trying to find her place, trying to find her powers, trying to figure out who she really is. And in this second book, she is connecting a little bit more with her own powers and her own self, and you get her to discover the things that she can do. You get to see her go to school, which was one of my favorite things. I love when we have magical schools with kids that have special abilities, and this book has some powers that are very specific and really different from other fantasy books, so that's also something that I really love about the story. And it gets a little bit darker in this book. We are getting to know forbidden territories, forbidden places, so if you're looking for a great middle grade fantasy, this series is definitely something that you should check out. Now let's talk about one of my favorite books that I have read in 2021 so far, and one that I was unsure of but it just blew me away, and that is The Sundown Motel by Simone St. James. I love this book so much more than I thought I would, and I feel like if you're somebody that loves true crime, you're gonna definitely love this book. This is a thriller with some horror elements to it, and it is told from 2 different perspectives. We have 2 different women. We have Viv in the 80s and we have Carly in 2017, and they are both girls that, you know, get to this hotel and they start investigating about this hotel, about their guests, about their past, about the people that have disappeared in the hotel, and you get to see them do a lot of research. And the more they research, the more that things come out to the surface. And I absolutely love this story because the way that the author is slowly connecting both timelines flawlessly until we get to the end, it's just amazing. I loved it and I was super engaged. Definitely gonna check out more books by the author. It's gonna be maybe an auto-buy author for me because I just really love this story. Apart from those interesting crime stories, we have such amazing character development. The characters in this book feel so real, so close to you. I just absolutely loved it. And yeah, like I said, this is one of my favorite books so far from 2021. And to conclude this wrap up, I have 2 books that I did give 5 full coffee mugs. The first one is Volume 4 of Lock and Key. Not too much I have to say about this one. Absolutely love this series. This graphic novel is one of my favorite ones. From the story to the characters to the graphics, how gore and brutal it is. I just love it. If you're not familiar with the story, we follow a family that after the death of the father move into this mansion, and the kids find these keys that have specific powers, specific things that the keys can do. And in each book we get to discover new keys, but we also still see how they are using the keys that they found at the beginning as well, and they all have special abilities, and it's just so wholesome to me. And the last one is a compilation of 2 short horror stories that just blew me away and took me back to when I was reading Roald Dahl and loving his messed up stories with horrible endings, and that is A Bright Enchanted Suffering by Eric LaRocca. Now, these stories were supposed to come out in March. However, the author got an offer to make a bigger short horror story compilation to be released later on the year, so I believe it's going to be released officially in September under a new name with more short horror stories, which, you know, I'm really happy for him because I just love his writing. I just think his short horror stories are amazing. These 2 are just, I could reread them anytime. I gave it 5 coffee mugs. I don't give 5 coffee mugs too many books anymore. I reserve that for things that really blew me away or were really special. And these 2 short horror stories were chef's kiss, amazing. So I'm so happy that he got a deal to bring us more short horror stories, and I'm happy as well that it's still gonna come out in 2021. So sadly, this book is no longer gonna be released, so this is a unique version, if you may. This is a unicorn. Because this is no longer gonna be produced. However, I'm excited for September and to get to read more stories. These 2 are going to be included in that compilation together with other ones. So when the new book is released, hopefully in September, I'll make sure to grab it and let you guys know how I feel about the other stories. So you guys, this was everything that I read in the month of February. It was a really good reading month for me. Most of the things that I have read had 3 coffee mugs or up, which is pretty good actually, to be honest. I did read a lot of like short things like graphic novels and novellas. That's why I managed to read so much. But still, a really good reading month. So I hope that you enjoyed this wrap up. Let me know down below what is the best book that you have read in the month of February. Thank you so much for watching, you guys. Please give the video a big thumbs up for support. If you want to follow me in other social media, the links are down below. I am especially active on Twitter, so that's the best way to connect with me. And I hope to see you all guys in the next coffee time. Bye!